I'm not going 10,000 miles from here to help murder and burn another poor nation, simply to continue the domination of white slave masters. Muhammad Ali didn't just say this. He spat it into the microphones of Middle America while sitting on a plush sofa next to a man in a beige polyester suit. While Johnny Carson was busy playing safe with card tricks and light-hearted banter, Merv Griffin opened the door to a version of Ali that the sports world was desperately trying to bury. This wasn't just a boxing champion talking. This was a calculated career suicide that the television networks couldn't turn off fast enough. The truth is, Ali knew exactly what he was doing. He was breaking the machine from the inside. Most people just see the highlights of the fights, but you're now part of a small group of fans who actually look behind the curtain at what made the legend truly dangerous. Join this inner circle of truth seekers by hitting subscribe right now. See, the media system was designed to keep athletes in a very small, very quiet box. You show up, you punch the guy, you sell some soda, and you go home. But Ali looked directly into the camera lens, ignored the teleprompter, and started a fire that nearly burned his entire legacy to the ground. Merv Griffin's set became a glitch in the Hollywood machine, where the raw, unedited reality of the 70s spilled out over the coffee tables of millions. Look at who profits from a quiet athlete. The sponsors, the promoters, and the suits in the high-rise offices. Ali didn't care about their bottom line or their stock prices. He leaned forward, sweat glistening under the hot, buzzing studio lights, and forced the audience to look at the parts of the world they were trying to ignore. This was a high-stakes gamble that left him banned from the ring and nearly broke. You're going to want to know what I exposed next about how the network executives reacted when the phone started ringing off the hook. Subscribe now so you don't miss the moment the studio lights dimmed on a career everyone thought was over. The studio audience didn't clap, they didn't cheer. They sat in a suffocating, heavy silence while Merv fumbled with his note cards, realizing his show was no longer under his control. The producers behind the glass were likely sweating through their shirts, watching their ratings climb while their reputations crumbled in real time. It was an insult to the public's intelligence to think Ali would play the role of the humble servant after everything he'd already lost. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a system error that the industry never found a patch for. He sat there, his hands moving with the same speed they had in the ring, gesturing at a world that was trying to erase him. The physical tension in that room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Merv looked like he wanted to crawl under his desk, but Ali wouldn't let him off the hook. He kept talking, kept pushing, and kept glitching the reality of what a celebrity was supposed to be. This wasn't a PR stunt. It was a man choosing to end his career on his own terms rather than let the system dictate his silence. Every word was a punch. Every silence was a knockdown, and the world was watching it all happen on a Tuesday night broadcast. The red tally light on camera 2 was staring Ali down like an eye that wouldn't blink. And for the first time in television history, the man behind the lens was more afraid than the man in front of it. You there, sitting at home, think about the sheer weight of that moment. We are talking about an era where you didn't just go off script, you followed the teleprompter, or you disappeared. But Ali was leaning so far into Merv's personal space that you could see the reflection of the studio lights in his pupils. He was vibrating with a type of energy that didn't belong on a variety show, sandwiched between a ventriloquist act and a cooking segment. Look at who profits when a superstar keeps his mouth shut and just smiles for the camera. The sneaker brands, the soft drink empires, and the network suits who need every celebrity to be a predictable plastic product. Ali was a sledgehammer, hitting a glass display case. The switchboard back at the station wasn't just lighting up, it was melting down. Operators were frantically plugging cables into boards while angry viewers screamed about patriotism and decorum. But the truth is, the anger wasn't about what he said. It was about the fact that he was allowed to say it at all. The producers were gesturing wildly from the wings, trying to get Merv to cut to a commercial, but Merv was paralyzed. He was watching his ratings go through the roof, while his career safety net was being shredded in front of millions. It's an absolute insult to your intelligence to believe the official story that this was just a lively debate. This was a systemic malfunction. The media machine is built to filter out the raw edges, to sand down the personalities until they fit into a 30-second spot. Ali wasn't just refusing to be sanded down. He was the sandpaper. He started talking about the money, specifically the blood money that fueled the very industry he was currently sitting in. He pointed a finger that looked like a lightning rod and called out the hypocrisy of a country that wanted him to fight overseas but wouldn't let him eat at a lunch counter at home. The silence from the audience became a physical character in the room. You could practically hear the dust hitting the floor. Nobody was coughing. Nobody was shifting in their seats. They were frozen by the sight of a man committing professional suicide and enjoying every second of it. This is what happens when the system error becomes the main.
And suddenly I was working for Group W in Philadelphia. Yeah.
A title that was supposed to represent a certain kind of reliable, controllable American power. Ali took that image and lit it on fire on live TV. And here is the kicker that the history books like to skip over. While the suits were panicking, the kids at home were leaning closer to the screen. They weren't seeing a glitch. They were seeing the truth for the first time in high definition. The grainy, flickering tube TV wasn't showing a sports star. It was showing a manual on how to break the locks on your own cage. The camera operator's hands were likely shaking, trying to keep the frame steady, as Ali's movements became more erratic and more commanding. Every time Merv tried to pivot back to a safe topic, Ali would shut him down with a look that would have floored a heavyweight contender. He didn't need gloves in that studio. The words were doing more damage than a left hook ever could. Look at who profits from your silence and you will understand why they tried so hard to bury this footage for years. They want you to think the 70s were all disco balls and bell-bottoms, but the reality was this high-tension wire act where one man decided he was bigger than the medium. The network eventually slammed into a commercial break, cutting Ali off mid-sentence with a loud, jarring jingle for laundry detergent. The transition was so violent it felt like a car crash. 1 second, you had the most dangerous man in America deconstructing the military-industrial complex, and the next, a smiling housewife was talking about grass stains. That's how the system tries to fix a glitch. It buries the revolution in consumerism, but it was too late. The signal had already been sent. The phones were still ringing, and the legend of the man who couldn't be muted was already written in the static. You have to realize that this wasn't just a bad interview. It was a declaration of war against the very idea of the celebrity puppet. When the cameras finally stopped rolling and the studio went dark, Ali didn't look like a man who had lost his job. He looked like a man who had finally found his voice, and he didn't care if the rest of the world was too scared to listen. The floor of the studio was littered with discarded scripts and cigarette butts, a graveyard of the plan the producers had for that night. Ali walked off that set into a storm of controversy that would follow him for decades, leaving Merv Griffin alone under the hot lights, staring at an empty chair that felt like it was still burning. This is the part they don't teach you in school because it's too dangerous. It shows that the entire spectacle of fame is a fragile shell that can be cracked by one person who refuses to play their part. The system glitch wasn't Ali's behavior. The glitch was the fact that the system thought it could ever own him in the first place. This was the moment the mask of Hollywood fell off, revealing the terrified, greedy face of an industry that realized it had lost control of its biggest star. And the most incredible part? He was just getting started. If you think this studio meltdown was the end of the story, you're missing the biggest piece of the puzzle. The real fallout didn't happen on camera. It happened in the back rooms where the contracts were kept. Subscribe now to see the secret memos that moved between the network and the government the very next morning. You're not going to believe the price they tried to put on his head just to keep him from ever getting near a microphone again. The game was rigged, but Ali had already flipped the table and the pieces were still falling. The world was different now, and there was no going back to the quiet, comfortable lies of the past. The phones at the network didn't stop ringing for 72 hours straight. It wasn't fans calling to cheer him on. It was the corporate suits in skyscrapers screaming about their brand image and demanding blood. Within days, the endorsements evaporated like water on hot pavement. Coca-Cola, the big banks, the car companies, they all vanished from his portfolio overnight. They didn't just want him off the air, they wanted him erased from the public consciousness. The reality is that this was a professional execution disguised as a television segment. He was effectively blacklisted, stripped of his right to earn a living, and watched by federal agents who recorded his every move and tapped his phone lines. The industry tried to bury him under a mountain of lawsuits and tax audits, hoping the sheer financial pressure would force him to crawl back on his knees and apologise to the cameras. But Ali didn't blink. He spent what should have been his absolute prime years in cold courtrooms instead of boxing rings, watching his bank account drain to zero while his rivals got rich and famous on his vacant throne. Most people would have folded in weeks under that kind of weight, but he was built to withstand a different kind of pressure. If you think you can handle the raw truth about what happens when a star finally bites the hand that feeds them, then subscribe only if you have the stomach to watch these deep dives until the very end. This wasn't just a bad career move, it was a total demolition of the celebrity contract. He chose to be a target rather than a tool, and the system punished him with everything it had in the arsenal. If you respect that kind of grit and want to see how the rest of this war played out behind closed doors, you might want to stick around for the next chapter of this chaos. The price of his defiance was a total insult to the idea of a fair fight. It wasn't just a few lost matches or a temporary suspension. The final receipt was $5 million in immediate lost revenue, 43 months of his physical peak stolen by the government, and a permanent label as the most hated man in America. He paid the ultimate tax for his freedom, and he didn't ask for a single cent in change. That is the literal cost of breaking the machine. That is the price you pay when you decide that your soul isn't for sale. The Supreme Court eventually realized they were holding a ticking time bomb that was about to blow up the entire legal system. On June 28, 1971, the justices finally blinked and wiped his conviction off the books in a unanimous decision. It wasn't because they suddenly grew a conscience. It was because the paper trail of their own corruption had become too messy to ignore. But the victory felt like a hollow joke. Ali was 30 years old now, and the lightning in his feet had been replaced by the lead of 3 years of stress and stagnation. He stepped back into the square circle to find a world that had moved on without him. The young, hungry lions were waiting, and Ali had to reinvent himself as a human punching bag just to survive the rounds he used to dance through. He went from being a ghost no one could hit to a target that refused to fall. Every legendary battle that followed, from the rumble in the jungle to the thriller in Manila, was essentially a high-stakes debt collection. He was fighting to reclaim the millions the government had effectively stolen from him during his exile. You are watching the literal dismantling of a man in real time, all because he dared to say no to the most powerful machine on earth. If you want to make sure these moments of raw defiance are never forgotten by a world that loves to rewrite history, subscribe to leave your mark in this archive of human folly. Most viewers will just scroll past this and forget the cost of integrity by tomorrow morning. If you are smarter than the average crowd and actually value the brutal truth over the shiny PR versions of these stories, prove it and subscribe right now. The system didn't just want his title, it wanted his dignity. And when it couldn't take that, it settled for his health. The final receipt for his rebellion is a list of numbers that would bankrupt any other soul. We are talking about $12 million in lost career earnings during his peak, another $4 million spent on legal fees to keep himself out of a cage, and 40 years of living with a body that eventually stopped obeying his commands. The trembling torch at the 1996 Olympics wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the physical proof of the war he fought against a country that tried to erase him. He paid the highest price imaginable to remain the only person in the room who couldn't be bought. To suggest he should have just played the game and kept his mouth shut is a total insult to your intelligence. He chose the fire, and he let it burn until there was nothing left but the legend. That is the cost of being a glitch in the Matrix. That is the price of the truth. The truth is, Ali's hands didn't just shake from age, they shook from the price of war. If this changed your perspective, subscribe. Don't engage. Don't comment. Just subscribe and observe from the shadows. He lost $12 million and 3 prime years. To say he should have stayed quiet is a total insult to your intelligence. The system took his health, but he kept his name.